Ladies and gentlemen, there is some terrifying force in the world that is trying to prevent me from doing this daily. My internet died on Tuesday. The stream crashed just now after part 1, but I am relentless. I will do Bomber versus MMA. Let's recap what I was just saying at the end of part 1. We saw my joy of MMA's opening, my joy of Bomber's follow-through, mainly focusing on tanks, but most importantly of all, and I guess we'll go ahead and get to see it again, was how Bomber set himself up to push. We're going to see really bold moves from Bomber, and the only reason he can do these is because he just clears for anything that would spot his push happening. Because again, if you're darting into a territory, you first have to ask, why would tanks be sieged here? If you can give me a really good answer, like, he has a base here, why wouldn't he siege up there? That's fine. Don't run into their blind. But if there's nothing there to really defend or to siege up, why the hell would Terran be sieged up there at all? Well, because he saw your push coming. This is taking forever. I'm going to continue to hide here. So Bomber is really good about checking for those. And the last thing that we were trying to say before everything went kaput is, what is the purpose of Bomber's push? What is the purpose of any sort of push in Terran versus Terran? Almost always, you are simply trying to pivot to get within siege range of an expansion. In particular, we are often trying to pivot to get into siege range of the third. We're going to see this in action here. Let's go to the Bomber cam. We're only going to be looking at his point of view for pretty much the rest of this game. These are spotting for anyone who could possibly be seeing this push.
Research complete.
So upon killing all those, Bomber doesn't need to waste scans. He's going to get a little cautious the instant he spots an enemy. And then when he scans, he's going to scan boldly far forward. So, alright. Here comes a Bomber. Notice again, he's going to scan because he's moving forward. And this is very reasonable for an army to be sieged here because it saw Bomber. So great. Where does Bomber go to? He goes as far frickin' up as he can, and this is the pivot point. Move those tanks as far the hell forward as you can and siege up. Look at this mini-map. Oh, this mini-map is a thing of beauty. Bomber was just here and just went and charged in. Why did I love having those tanks produced so early? Because Bomber has a pivot point. He knows he has more tanks than his opponent. His opponent has 7. He has 8. Bomber somehow miraculously got more Marines. That's just because he's good at macro. MMA is going to have better upgrades in a moment. I think Bomber only ever has this one engineering bay this whole game, too. Because he is, again, so focused on producing all the things. Oops, to the Bomber cam. So here is what I love about having all these tanks. Bomber, what's he doing? He's just trying to get as close up, as forward as possible. And then he's going to pivot. He's going to try to find a vulnerability over here to draw units up here, and then if units get drawn here, he's going to come back this way, and if he's coming this way and more units show up, he's going to go back the other way. Standard pivoting. Pivot, pivot, pivot. Cool, look, stuff is sieged up. Pretty cool stuff. We see a little explosion. That's one of the reasons why we like that Raven. These sorts of step forward moves, I almost view as bonuses. They're great to do. Once you have moved forward, you have defined the line. MMA has to have some tanks here to worry about units heading towards the third. MMA has to have some tanks here to make sure that he can reinforce against movement up here. So Bomber just kind of sieges up along a point, taking stuff down. Whoops. There's the sort of endless scans that come up. So we see all this purple that's getting stockpiled here. Really have no fear about using those a lot. So with the wonderful use of more tanks, look at this Bomber. He's just gonna try to go. As aggressive as we have seen Bomber be, with moving his units forward, so too be aggressive with these pivots.
Additional supplies.
Be aware as well and do not fall to the curse of Bomber and float your shit directly to death.
Additional supplies.
This is so cool. Bomber makes 2 attempts here. And you know what he's going to do? He's just going to try to look for another chance to pivot. Vision-wise, look at it. A single scan, and he just goes right back to the same place. The scan was hunting for where these Marines are. This is so cool. Now, you heard me say, what is the goal of this big push here? The goal of this big push is to get within sieging range of a base. And almost always that base is the 3rd. So cool. We do this huge drop here. This might win us the game. This sometimes will win you the game. This is not the point. The point is this move. Because, hey, what do you know? There's nothing there. AKA, there's no Marines there. So Bomber lifted away, and now is sieging up within range of the 3rd. Alright, cool. Now Bomber is behind in supply. Does not matter in the slightest, because he's not hugely behind, and he's got a whole bunch of tanks within range of the 3rd. He's eventually going to have more money. Kaboom! Oh my god, you got your ball, Sheriff! What a good kitty. Good girl.
Mineral field.
Hey, remember how I said 5 barracks and 2 factories? Eventually to 7 barracks? That is what I'm talking about.
Upgrade.
So yeah. Oh, whoops, sorry, I was looking at the cat. I was not paying attention at all to why he retreated. Whoops. Alright, okay. Sorry, my bad. Sorry, the cat, let me tell you something. Sheriff has discovered pens. And pens are apparently the coolest thing in the universe.
Upgrade. Mineral.
Okay. Here is a statement. One of my favorite statements of late. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to be within sieging range of the 3rd, to have forced a lift, and to just see this much stuff. You see 8 tanks, you got 3, and to just go,
Field depleted.
nah, I'm gonna pull back, I'm gonna try again. You are allowed to think.
Upgrade.
But notice the theme that we are still seeing out of Bomber. He is staying really far forward. He is staying very far forward. And again, he would like to set up a pivot. So this sort of play is... This looks random. And it's okay not to do this. You don't have to do this. But it still comes down to this pivot point that was established just moments ago. Remember where all these tanks were? They were all sieged up right here. They're all sieged up in the middle. Remember what Bomber just saw? He saw some Marines moving out forward this way. In all likelihood, there is a push coming like this. But Bomber's not going to let that begin. He's just going to go balls to the wall, man. So cool. Now you might be asking yourselves, why would Bomber ever dream of doing such a thing? What a sweet in-game decision that was, first and foremost. And we see MMA trying to, you know, poke at this extra base. MMA's playstyle's pretty technical in this, and we're going to be looking at his more in the second game. But in these first games, uh-oh. Here comes the force. Where could tanks be sieged? Probably only here makes sense. Look at Bomber, he's walking. But once he sees some units, that's when he begins to scan. Yeah, spotting the push spotters. So what's Bomber trying to do? He's trying to get as forward a position as humanly possible to set up a little pivot point. Alright, Bomber. Siege it up. Siege it up, my friend. Oh. See, I find this moment to be just, like, so funny. Where there's, like, the one tank for Bomber. He doesn't have his tanks here. They're, like, all over the place. They're, like, straggling forever. But he, like, walks forward and sees a huge army, and then he's like, oh, well, I guess I better back up and maybe even siege my one tank. So just scanning. This is pretty typical. One thing I love for Bomber is that Bomber is willing to not siege the tanks. He's willing to not do that. He's willing to stay mobile. Bomber's happy to siege tanks up here. To try to, like, you know, lock the opponent back here, and then to do the drop stuff up here. Bomber waits a long-ass time to do this sort of stuff. So, alright. What's our play, huh? What's the move? What's the move, huh? Well, we create a little pivot point. Maybe either go up here, or go around there. Why is this move good? Why is a potential drop play up to this side good? Because the army's probably here. Probably here, intending on pushing here. I mean, we just saw that. So cutting up like this is hard for him to stop. Great. Oh, missed this scan real fast. Okay. So here's the load up. And as it's moving up, it gets scanned. So, of course, the whole army responds by moving up, and Bomber just simply unloads just out of scan range. Which allows him to move up a little bit. Look at this! Look at this, he got to move up a little bit. He lost some Marines. Oh, I have no fear about losing Marines. That's, like, no big deal. We can also begin to see, again and again and again, why Bomber is choosing to move here before he pushes up like this. If Bomber is here, he defends this drop. Notice that MMA is stuck here. MMA kind of wants to be here, because if MMA is here, all those Doom drops wouldn't have been able to get started. But being here as he is, Bomber is denying the Doom dropping. He can set himself up the gold. There's the scans. There's the rescans. So what's Bomber going to do? He's probably going to try to siege up in the middle. Again, he's just sort of pivoting up and down. This is unbelievably brave. These sorts of things, I don't even know how to describe logically. If you're pretty sure you can kill him, do it. And Bomber felt pretty sure. He just forces his way forward, wiggles back and forth. Alright, we have the pivot point, so we can do potential attacks like this to the south side. We can do potential drops up to the top side. We can even just do the greatest move that is rarely considered, which is just to kill these tanks. The greatest rarely considered move. So you'll notice Bomber's kind of setting up the line, but leaving a lot of tanks unsieged because his big goal, as we've been saying before, is to siege up within range of the third. So he's leaving some tanks to be able to do that. So again, we saw drops to pivot to the top side. Now he's going to try to pivot to the bottom side. Walks forward, took some hits, pulls right back. Huh, well, walking into tank fire is not so bad if you have really fast reaction times. Backing up a little bit, giving himself a little bit more space. Trying to pivot to the other side. The last little bit that I want to talk about is that if you are getting low at money at your third, or more simply, if you're getting your fourth, your opponent's probably getting his fourth. So alright. Woo! Moving to this side. Is there an expansion? No? Oh well, let's try to drop. Nope, we got scanned. Alright, coming right on back. Look at that! Right? Look at this! Oh my god. Do you see the juicy juice that is Bomber's gameplay? And of course, while Bomber's doing all that, you know, he's got to pull back and protect himself. Bomber would ideally like to be sieged up in range of a third. Or a fourth at this point in time.
Mineral field depleted. Upgrade
Whoops.
complete. Upgrade complete.
MMA basically defended the whole game until he felt forced to do a move out. I mean, this looks... But because Marines and tanks deal so much damage, this looks scarier than it is. I mean, it's pretty simple, where Bomber is setting up here, and then just bouncing back and forth like this with units until he sees an opportunity to go in here, or sees an opportunity to siege up there. And then whenever one of those opportunities materializes, everything else just sieges up and goes into the safest place possible. So even though this is weird to lift to third base. Whoa, why would you ever do that? Well, I mean, it's just super safe and super straightforward. Here's the move that I think is the hardest move of the game, and it's uncanny to me that you'd ever make this move as Bomber, which is that you see the army here, and you begin the attack again. I don't understand how you make that play. I mean, Bomber has some stuff here, but he's, like, trying to move forward with these tanks. Again, like, look at this. He's going this way. I don't know how you make this choice. I mean, he's sieging up. Yeah, he's got some rally points and whatever, but I don't know how you begin that move that early. So we've been talking about this before. Bomber goes to the south side because it protects this base against sieging. It protects his main base from drops. He's going to set up in the same position, or at least try. Now MMA is going to be the one who's trying to do this. This is straightforward. Bomber's just done so much damage throughout the entire game that eventually you're going to have an easy move like that. Pushes down the same path. Watch the forward scan that's going to be coming here. Kaboom! And Bomber literally just waltzes up and kills him. Oh my god, it's like a work of art. This game is. Man, I don't even think we're going to be able to go through the other two games, the last two games in detail. Work of art game. Work of frickin' art. So good. So good. So, I'm going to be swiftly going into the next game here that's on Deadwing. But, again, the takeaway that I love from that is Bomber did, frankly, a pretty low-risk opening. Both players did. They got Banshees. Oh, I'm going to try to attack you, whatever. I'll get my Raven, I'll get my Vikings, and let me just build my command centers, okay? Bomber, then, got a bunch of tanks. Just macroed. Just did it. Until he had Stim and Combat Shield. And then he started to do this beautiful move forward. Kind of a low scan push out. He wasn't scanning every step of the way. He was like spending most of his time unsieged, moving forward until he got as close as possible, and then just did this pretty little pivoting maneuver. Excuse me. There we go. Did this pretty little pivoting maneuver until he found a weak point. And anytime he got scanned, he just insta-backed off. Now, this game is going to be one I want to talk mostly about from MMA's point of view. But also, too, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to see from Bomber. I'm going to start from Bomber's vantage point, because I think this is just fantastic. Bomber went Reaper Expand. Great. What's the defining move in TVT? Banshees in the opening game. You have to get the Viking to be able to deal with that. But Bomber is electing to do a mech opening. He's going to go Hellion Viking. Some great placement with these missile turrets to get a nice spread. MMA, though, decides to do a very, very quick attack. And I'm just going to show this because I think it's amazing. Watch here. Watch here. Watch, watch, watch. Bomber's sitting here. Watch, watch, watch. Bomber sees the push. And watch this. Most of the time, people just die. Because they have Hellions. They have Vikings to deal with the Banshee. And that's it. And a push this early with the muscular tanks is a little too strong. But kaboom. Armory right out the gate. I just love this play. I mean, it's not like that complicated of a play. You know, you have the Hellions. Jesus. You have the Hellions anyways, so you may as well use them. But in this context, we see just Hellbats wind up being this just like amazing tool. Oh yeah, he's able to hold them off. Oh yeah. You just roast this man. That was sexy. Alright, so I'm going to be spending looking at this from MMA's point of view. So MMA is doing a very similar opening to last time, where he's getting the Banshee, he's getting the Reactor, he's scouting with the Hellion. Great. Even manages to do damage and sort of see what's going on in here. He sees 2 Hellions, okay. He's already committed to getting this factory up, producing tanks, and then just Marine tank, Banshee. Pretty common sort of way to play. MMA moves all the way down, heading to the expansion, yada 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 yada. So, we very much so see that MMA has identified no specific commitment to mech or bio. This push is simply a result of MMA seeing Reaper expand. Turns out to be a great play because this ends up being a very scary push to try to hold off. My throat's dry and suddenly I'm hoping it's not because I'm allergic to kitties. Oh god. Oh god, what a disaster that would be. Alright. So, okay, MMA begins to do a nice little series of things that are expected. He gets 2 extra barracks. 3 barracks is a pretty common number. But one thing that's kind of cool to me about this series is that MMA decides to go more aggressive and gets 4 barracks while still producing tanks, while still producing Vikings slash medevac. Excuse me. That yawns. That yawns. God, I hope I'm not allergic to kitties. That would be such a crisis. I'll take the shots, man. I'll have my DNA changed to make sure I can get the kitties. Actually, none of this is interesting. Skipping, skipping, skipping. I want to get to the positioning, baby. So MMA is reasonably confident he's up against mech because he has seen factories being produced. Uses the bio. I like to imagine the bio medevac forces as the ice cream scoop. Where they're going around and they scoop out vision, and as they're scooping out all that stuff, it's the tanks that get to go in and fill in the space, much like the cream. Scoop it out, and then it drips right back in there. Kaboom. Now I want ice cream. Yeah, look at this. 4 barracks. 5 barracks. 5 barracks. And nothing else. So here's a little scooping movement. Now, most of the time with mech, there tends to be much higher expansion count, like cumulatively among all players in games. The base count just gets higher. So, what's really cool, or in terms of a strategy, MMA is not looking to just do stuff with the third. You heard me last game obsess about ability to hit the third, to deny the third, and all that stuff. In this, it's just the bioing player is going to be looking for virtually any opportunity to apply pressure in any way to any base. And this idea of pivoting is really, really, really key. So again, we're going to see some scans, but the small bio forces are the ice cream scoop that's going to scoop out all the vision. We even see control group 1, literally the scoopers. And then control group 3 is a whole bunch of other assorted pastries. Oh, scare on. So, possible plays could be to siege up and then to try to load up here. That's one possible avenue of play. I would generally recommend against doing too much of that, and instead to focus on expansion assault or expansion denial. Simply picking off stuff in the main is okay, but this is nice because it was a way to delay this third base. Again, I think this is fine. This isn't like a bad play by any means, but I think it is a harder play because it's kind of unclear how much value is gleaned from this without those SCVs moving out. Like, we have 29 workers killed, which feels like a huge, huge amount. But, I mean, 14 have already been killed for MMA at this point in time. If you have ever struggled in bio versus mech, and you feel like you are being aggressive, I would look to times like these drops as times when stuff probably could have gone wrong. Because good players like Bomber, or just anyone who's experienced with mech, will probably be leaving a tank or two up in the main at the appropriate time. So it's very easy for a lot of this stuff to die. So again, 29 were killed, but 14 were already killed. Now this is a very flairful attack, but I think this is one of the fastest ways to lose against mech, because Bomber doesn't have a, or excuse me, MMA doesn't have a third. He doesn't even have a third command center. And Bomber does have a third command center, about to become a third base. So I look at that and I'm like, yeah, he killed 29 SCVs, but with the army gone, it's kind of hard to like scoop anything out. So this is where MMA's in a little bit of a, he's in problem town. So just basic little bio force drops, almost always fine to do. Move forward, move back, kind of have the freedom to do this. Let's talk about the ice cream action, huh? The scooping. So notice how much easier you can move forward. You don't actually have to spend as many scans. But there was pressure. Oh, you know, how do I want to say this? There's almost invisible pivot, like right here. In the last game, we saw literally Bomber tanks here, and MMA tanks here, and then we saw like movement around the sides like this, scooping back and forth. You don't even need that much stuff here. Oftentimes it's really common, and I'd almost say really prudent to do that, and really correct. Here, MMA just hits on this side a little bit, and moves down to the other side. I want to do a little bit of a contrast. So I think that what's easy to do is to look at games like this and say, oh, he's hitting here, and then he's going to try to hit like this. And then he's going to try to hit from this side, and then hit from this side. They view it as an action here, an action here. The reason why a pivot in the middle is so important is it's a direct threat by the front that pressures the player to be gravitated towards the middle, which allows this attack to deal damage or this attack to deal damage. You just look for whichever one is going to be stronger. So in this case, MMA, we're seeing him move down here, which, again, happens to be the vulnerable location. And it's a little bit because he's hitting in one place and hitting the other, but it's the threat of the big attack down the middle, the pivot point, that winds up being the most important piece. Pretty much the success of any of this. So right now, this is like MMA has gotten himself into a really victorious position. This is exactly what you want. So, alright, what's the pivot point? Probably right here, right? This is threatening this base already. We have this, so then we can do a swing up here if we see, you know, too many forces here. Or we can do the drop action down and in like that. We have a pivot.
Under attack.
This dropping here is just generally good tactics. It's not exactly what I want to talk about. See, look, continued scans here. Continued scans in the center to pivot around. Attack over here. Attack over here. Against Bio, it's generally better to do a big swing somewhere. Against Mech, it's generally a little bit better to do pokey things because each poke is actually able to get much higher value. Huzzah! Really annoying Hellbats. This is Bomber being really good. If I were looking at this from Bomber's point of view, I would talk about, hey, if you are feeling like you're about to die, send small, especially mineral-heavy counterattacks. Look at this. This is just... Oh, God. Alright, let's play. Where's the pivot? It's here. It's... They don't need to be sieged, but they're the thing directly threatening the front right there. Why is the scan here significant? Because there was pressure units here, kind of meaning that Bomber has to have units in the middle to defend against this pivot point, this pressure point that was just here. And you get to be a little sneaky. You can just abandon all the units there. There's Bomber scanning there, and Bomber's just like, oh shit, he left the pivot area. Alright. So we see stuff here, which is going to force Bomber to put stuff here. Again, directly in front of it. The tanks forming that gorgeous little pivot line. Oh, yes. I think the difference between these little pivot moves here and in the last game is that Bomber's going to be a little bit better at just breaking through whatever the pivot point is. Because Bomber's going to have Hellbats backed up by siege tanks. These siege tanks can break through and kill these siege tanks very quickly. So what this functionally means for MMA is he just has to retreat and reestablish and reposition those points a little bit more often.
Upgrade complete.
So this drop is not good without a threat at the front. The threat at the front makes Bomber do this move. There's only so many ways I can say that pivoting is happening here. Oh, hello, kitty. Yes, dig the claws into my chair. Yes. This drop is only successful because there was a threat at the front. Oh, he messed that one up.
Mineral field depleted.
So in a regular bio versus bio, you kind of... Either player can be the one who's shoving forward to be aggressive.
Mineral field.
But in bio versus mech, the bio player can pretty much always be moving forward and establishing his front line. I mean, like 3 tanks can effectively do that. Oh, hi, kitty. That's my router. If you touch it at all, it turns off. But you can turn it off if you want. Oh, both the kitties are there. There's so many cords. Oh my god, he's standing on the modem. Sheriff, come here. Alright, okay, good. I don't think the cat knows its own name. Alright, cool. I've been kind of repeating a lot of the same words here. But it's the same move. Again and again and again. So there's some counterattacks. Those just require APM and focus to be able to defend. I'm not going to be focusing too much on that. How does MMA begin to reestablish any ability to deal pressure? Because what we have seen is MMA being here, and here, and here. He's been really far forward. He's had a strong pivot, and a strong place to pivot. How does he establish control again? Let us watch.
Upgrade complete.
Doing quite a lot of chilling, eh?
Mineral field depleted.
Alright, so first things first.
Add-on.
Checking for anything that could be spotting.
Vespine geyser exhausted.
Ba-ding-ding-ding-ding-ding. At this point, I was pretty convinced that Bomber was going to win this game. I was pretty certain at this point in time that Bomber was destined to win. Until... I almost feel like it was accidental. MMA loaded up to do a drop, and Bomber shoved in. And then MMA just unloaded again on top of everything, and it was like, okay again. So we see here's the pivot in the middle. Here's the forces moving around to the right side. Moving about the pivot. Here's the other forces. They've even been scanned. Moving around this pivot point. Again, these little counters and drops are made so much stronger by the existence of a strong pivot. Here is MMA pulling back. And what's nice when you're up against a more, when you're up against the final mech attack, your pivot point can start to drift back towards your base. As long as the units are here, and your units are as far forward as possible, or I should say your tanks are as far forward as possible, it's these movements around. Zeta so strong.
Upgrade complete.
We actually saw a very similar move between MMA and Bomber, where Bomber was pulling back in the last game and sieged his tanks up, and then did a doom drop with a bunch of bio around that line of tanks. Actually, like, many times did that. And look, okay, so we had our pivot, we did our damage. What's the next move? To move the pivot forward. To move the pivot forward. Can we move it forward? No, we can't. This is about as far forward as it can be, so let's keep dropping. And of course, if you're a meching player, you've probably had this experience as well before. If you're moving here, you also have to be scooping along the vulnerable side. Now, as MMA's doing this drop, MMA, oh, he scans! Alright, great, that means he can move the pivot forward. He's gonna scan again to see if there's anything else there. Well, look at this, the army revealed itself. And then it just takes one critical mistake. So, I mean, I think that this last moment was quite lucky, right? Like, let's see here. So, at this point in time, Bomber has left his forces so far forward this entire time that MMA was able to get these nice drop opportunities, but this is just a gift from the heavens. Come now. Look at this, a gift. The army values are relatively close. I mean, there's 30 fewer workers, but there's 16 tanks to 10 tanks. I mean, this shouldn't be an unwinnable situation for Bomber anymore. And then this happens. Oh, what a gift. So, despite the fact that the power went down, and we had to turn off the game, and the fact that we're going over, still want to emphasize the same thing that we saw in Game 1 and Game 2. The notion of the pivot. Bio versus bio, as well as mech versus bio, there was one of the players moving forward to siege up to then start to bounce around to the other side. And the first goal is getting as far forward as possible. And then if you're on his half of the map, you can begin to shoot around to the other sides of this pivot because of the threat of all the units in the middle. In this mech game, we saw, again, MMA moving very far forward. And again, it's the pivot point where all the tanks are. It's the threat of the shove from the front that makes your opponent want to set all his defenses here so that you can go around to the sides. So, of course, when the mech begins to push us towards our base, oh no! Well, no, still everything's the same. You just keep doing these attacks around the side. We see MMA pull back a little more and do more attacks around the side. Oh, so good. So when we come back, we're going to just, like, lightning freaking speed watch two games, the last two games between MMA and Bomber, where MMA managed to close out. And the theme of those will be, how do we get advantages early on in TVT that will play out? How do we just get early advantages? Because I'm talking about the mid and late game and sort of this in-game judgment and how the pivoting thing works. Let's look at some early game stuff after that. Yep. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. We'll be back.